The planet Earth.
Some call me nature.
I am very passionate about the planet
Earth.
A living, breathing planet capable of sustaining whatever life forms we see fit to deposit on it.
Spock, judging by the pollution content of the atmosphere, I believe we have arrived.
It's the planet stupid.
No. It's the planet stupid.
My apologies for the delay. Let's bring on Belinda Waymouth to talk about the environment. Belinda, welcome to the show again. Hi,
Kim. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you doing?
I'm well. I'm, another unimpressive cop, I'm afraid. Not great results.
Yeah, they had a big fight toward the end of it. Will they include, the decreasing of the use of fossil fuels, the weaning of fossil fuels, or not? And it looks like maybe they ended up going for it, but not as strongly as possible.
Yeah, it was business as usual. I mean, this is what happens at every COP. Should we talk about the wins and then we'll go to the the losses are? Okay, so last week, as we said, the first day they agreed that there had to be a loss and damage fund. So that was great, except it's underfunded. And, it was the first global stocktake, the GST, the assessment on the progress towards the Paris COP's goal of just keeping heating to 1.5 degrees Celsius or below. And what happens is that the ambitions and the sort of the actions that need to be taken to keep heating to just 1.5 degrees Celsius is not at all tied to the funding. So not tied to the loss and damage fund that developing countries need. The developed countries that have been able to put all these, CO2 emissions up into the atmosphere pay for. So yes, we got the loss and damage fund, but it's a bit gutless like the rest of COP. And what happened yesterday was they finally agreed to this compromise deal. They got it pushed over the finish line, and it's always about the wording. And so what the wording came down to was that we will transition away from fossil fuels, not phase out. And phase out was what the super majority of countries wanted. So there were 187 countries. I'm trying to talk about the wins, but the losses, I'm afraid, Kim, just come right in on top of the wins, because, the wins are, they're not enforceable and they don't go fast enough. And this transition away from, the language is the verbs they use, everything is so vague and there are so many loopholes.
It sounds like semantics. Transition away from phase out. What's the difference?
Well, phase out is like we're going to get rid of them. Transition is like we're moving away. Michael Mann, he's a climatologist and a geophysicist at the University of Pennsylvania, huge climate change, advocate, very outspoken. He's had death threats and all kinds of things. And he said, the world talking about transitioning away from fossil fuels is like a diabetic telling their doctor, I'm going to transition away from the donuts. I'm going to, it's pathetic is what it is. I'm just going to say it how I see it, because, it's, you get, you've got Al Jaber and the United Arab Emirates, number one delegate person yesterday, at the forefront of the photograph, smiling like, oh, we've done this great thing. But you really haven't. What scientists said is this is a win for fossil fuels. Yeah. This is a win for fossil fuel companies, and the, there they are. They're all clapping and, saying how great it is. But what Michael Mann also said is that, the rules of COP20, these COPs really have to be changed, because the fact that that guy can be the president of COP28 when he is, president of ADNOC, the UAE's biggest and dirtiest, oil company, that's a travesty. And then the fact that the objections of the holdout petrostates hold the rest of the world hostage. So it was the petrostates that got the transition in there as opposed to phase out. There were 130 countries that said it should be phase out, that we really have to be, moving away from fossil fuels. We know that they're what causes climate change. But they got overruled by 57 petrostates who were like, no, we don't want to do that. So that's not democracy. And that means that, COP28 is really sort of toothless in a way, because you get, countries that are, big oil producers, and the US included, and they want to keep, business as usual. So, as I said, I'm trying to talk about the wins.
Yeah. No.
Really, the negatives are coming out. One of the wins was 118 governments did pledge to triple the world's renewable energy capacity in the next 7 years by 2030. And the one thing about that that's good is that when you pledge to triple the world's renewable energy capacity, you are actually cutting fossil fuel production, not just simply adding renewables to the energy mix, because tripling the world's renewables is pretty substantial. So those are sort of the wins, but, COP didn't really, the response, it was not enough, COP28, to deal with how fast the world is heating. And, so climate scientists, advocates have come away from, COP28, feeling that we have an agreement that's feeble, it's lukewarm, it's full of empty promises, and that it really lays the groundwork for millions of climate-related casualties, both human and other species. And another, so fossil fuels obviously are huge because 20% of the world's emissions come from transport. So they're enormous. But another big contributor is agribusiness. Well, they had, along with the, so in the 2,400 and whatever it was, lobbyists who were at COP, who were mainly fossil fuel lobbyists, agribusiness was also represented. And agribusiness, guess what, got off scot-free with this COP. There was no mention of the role that beef and large-scale agriculture play in climate change. So no limits on agriculture in the final text either. And basically, because there's not any kind of obligation set down or hard timeline for the, and I'm doing air quotes, you can't see me, transition to clean energy, the language, of the agreement, it's super vague. And it means that, China can keep building their coal-fired power plants. The US can keep on pumping and expanding oil production, along with these other petrostates, like the United Arab Emirates, So I'm afraid, it was, great, and it's crazy because you've got the majority of countries there saying, we really want action. And these developing countries and these small island states saying, we really need your help. We're on the front lines of it. We didn't make it happen. You guys did. And you get away scot-free. You get to, keep pumping, oil and gas and, talk about transitioning away from it. But the money is speaking, louder, unfortunately.
One of the things they did do at COP28 was set up this loss and damage fund for the countries you just mentioned, developing nations which are most affected by the climate crisis. But I don't know that they're putting in enough or pledging enough to this loss and damage fund.
No. I mean, last week, remember we were talking about it, and we were talking about, they've pledged $100 billion annually, but they say that what the damage, the bill right now annually is between $400 to $580 billion. So 100 billion is nothing. And, the United States, I mean, what we've pledged, is, it's peanuts. And we're historically the biggest, greenhouse gas emitter, since industrialization. And the other thing is this global stocktake, opens the door for these, global, carbon capture and storage technologies, blue hydrogen, geoengineering, they're all seen as niche, expensive, ineffective technologies. And so this global stocktake is saying, hey, we're going to, add these things, as mitigating tools. but there's not proper oversight been written into the text. So it's just too vague, too wishy-washy when we really need decisive leadership. And next COP is going to be held in Azerbaijan. I'm going to say the name of the country
Azerbaijan.
wrong. Yes,
Azerbaijan, with also somebody in charge that has ties to the fossil fuel industry. So it's not going to be anything different than we saw this time.
Yeah. So 3 years in a row, we had Egypt, we had the United Arab Emirates, and now Azerbaijan. So it's like I say over and over, there is so, the preponderance, the majority of scientists, 97%, we know this is being caused by the burning of fossil fuels. We know what we need to do. Mm-hmm. It's phasing out as fast as possible. And we had another 2 weeks of squabbling at a COP that didn't get us, close to the goals that we need to be, really committed to.
Right.
And when you see the photographs, I sent you a couple of links of the climate activists who are there, the young activists who don't really get a voice at COP. They get a tiny little stage where they're allowed to, have protests, but, they're also in a country that, is,
limiting protests.
Yeah, exactly. So they get this tiny little blue stage, it's called, and they're all, in each other's arms, sobbing at the end because they really get this vague language and sort of toothless deal that older, it's like, petrostate, heads of petrostates and heads of fossil fuel companies thinks are great. These, young millennials and Gen Zers know this is not great. This is not great for them. It's not great for their future. It's not great for the planet. I mean, how painful for them,
You sent me this article because we're running out of time. I wanted to make sure we get to it. That says, and I think this really tells the story. And this is the reason that all the lobbyists were there at the COP28. Making oil, reads the headline, is more profitable than saving the planet. And these numbers tell the story. You talk a little bit about, I think as long as it's more profitable, we're going to have pushback.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we live in the dominant social paradigm is capitalism, and we're just completely devoted to this perpetual economic growth. And capitalism does not tell the ecological truth. And this over extraction of oil, of the world's resources is leading us down this path of destruction. But it is kind of amazing. So the rate of return on oil and gas, 20 to 50%, which of course shareholders love, and versus the 5 to 10% that you get on renewable energy. When BP did this all-out embrace of green energy, its stock fell 10% in a 2-year period, while Chevron and Exxon Mobil saw these record growth. Chevron stock went up 46%, Exxon Mobil 57%, I know I've mentioned these figures before, so oil companies are investing $800 billion a year. And if just half of that went to renewables in the next 7 years, we would be on track for that 1.5 degrees only of heating. But they're spending not, half of that 800 billion, which would be 400 billion. They're spending 2.5% on clean energy. It's bonkers. One thing that I will, that I do need, I'm going to finish on some positive news. I love this. So there is actually this shift happening with world investing. So right now, it's estimated that there's 1.7 trillion invested in clean energy globally per year versus 1.1 trillion in oil and gas. So the shift is happening, and it's a thing that I, say all the time on the show, it is happening. It's just not happening fast enough. But the reason why governments are doing this is because they know that greenhouse gas emissions are super expensive. There's, trillions in economic damage, happening from climate change. There will be huge health cost savings when we aren't, putting all this particulate pollution into the atmosphere. And there was I've talked about this before about the 2- and 3-wheeled electric vehicles that are really making a dent in the world, and China is producing them. And, you've got in Kenya, the government has said, okay, no more subsidizing fossil fuels. We only subsidize electric energy now. And they are having this huge transition to these electric vehicles. And, this is billions and billions of people in the world. And, the innovation with these little, 3-wheeled vehicles is that, rather than when they come into a recharging station, they have to wait for the battery to be recharged. They pull out the spent battery and put a full battery in and take off again.
Right.
And so there are these, innovations happening at, I mean, it's at a low level, but it's important. We just need them happening at the top where the power and the money is,
Belinda Waymouth, you are just a breath of fresh air, and I always start thinking about really important issues every time I go away from a conversation with you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, totally my pleasure, Kevin. Totally my pleasure. I look forward to it next week.
I look forward to it too. We'll see you then. Belinda Waymouth, have a great afternoon.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
More
Is the planet stupid? No. It's the planet stupid.
next time, only on The Mark Thompson Show.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.